Welcome into Wingin It Wednesday, again brought to you by our friends at Service Cadillac, Warren Caudle and Carol Ross. Hope you all had a Merry Christmas, a good weekend. We're in that weird, I won't tell Carol what I called it in the break, but we're in that weird point in between Christmas and New Year where you just can't quite figure out what day it is. The office here is really quiet. A lot of people are off. I'm wearing short pants today in December, but you know, it's how it goes. Happy to see y'all.
Thank you, Rob. Good to see you.
I mean, what did you expect? I mean,
but I do like the bumper music. That was kind of a throwback. First time I saw Peter, Paul, and Mary was at the Villanova Roadhouse.
Wow.
Yeah, they were
Warren,
great.
Did you ride a bull at the Villanova Roadhouse as well?
Be careful when you talk about you can't figure out what day it is because your boss may be listening and he may come in here and want you to take a little test.
Hey, I'll tell you this. Brain cells have never been required to work on KPEL. And that's okay.
Oh.
I have it under control.
Wait a minute. Is that a commentary?
No.
Wait, is that a commentary on the guests, too?
Well, I'll tell you this. Here's what I'll tell you. This morning, we talked about all the New Year's Eve stuff going on this weekend. Hey, go to KPEL. We have a full list. Someone emailed me, because let me tell you, the KPEL listeners are the smartest in Acadiana.
No kidding.
Someone emails me and says, I see this event listed there. They say they're going to have lanterns, paper lanterns, and they are against the law in Louisiana. So you better call them and let them know. So we are keeping people safe, on day one. So we'll get in trouble.
Even outdoors?
Well, apparently it's because me and JC from KTDY get into this big discussion.
Well, you don't want to let them loose.
You don't want them let them
They
loose.
are environmentally damaging.
And I said,
like balloons, those Kevlar balloons.
Exactly.
Those little,
and I said,
not Kevlar, but those foil.
Yeah,
whatever.
I could imagine that if something happened and had to fall back down to earth, the wind of the fall would put it out. And he said, but you still don't know. You're sending fire from where you are someplace else, and you don't know where it's going. I said, well, that is a good point.
Yeah.
So, anywho, let's get to our topics for today. Oh, I want to say this. On Christmas, Adam, like the Friday before Christmas Eve, I went to get my car washed over at Service Cadillac at the wash. Tell me if you've ever been somewhere at a business, good-sized business, where you have, the owner and one of his kids doing the dirty work. Jesse Lequette and Lorraine, his daughter, were pressure washing cars. Before you pull into the wash, they pressure wash to get the bugs off before you go in. We're pressure washing cars out there with their employees.
I don't doubt it.
It was so great.
I really don't doubt it. I don't think people understand.
I had to roll my window down, and the water was blowing in my car. Merry Christmas. Good to see you. Thanks for buying a car with us. I love it.
That's why there's such customer loyalty, and their staff loyalty is amazing. But those people are such good people.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, they are.
That is the difference between management and leadership.
There you go.
There you go, Warren.
And these businesses, these companies, big or small, little or whatever, they are born and they are built through leadership, and they are destroyed eventually through management.
That's it. There you go on this Wednesday. Take that into 2017.
Hey.
Let's start with President Obama's comments on a podcast that is called the Axe Files, and it's David Axelrod does this podcast. It's distributed through some university, some kind of way.
University of Chicago.
University of
His
Chicago.
alma mater.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, so it's really just the commentary sort of thing. There's no hard questions, we know, but Obama says if he would have been allowed to run, if he wasn't term limited out and ran against Donald Trump, that he would have won. Warren, let's change it up. Let's start with you.
First thing I want to say is I'm not going to laugh at him. It hasn't dawned on him yet, and I understand where he's coming from. I think when history is written about Barack Obama and the Democratic Party, it'll be lumped in the way it should be with as the darkest periods in the country. In the world, in government, where all the isms came together of the Nazism, socialism, communism, fascism, and all that stuff.
Egotism.
All those people want government control. And anytime you have got government control and government power and it gets more and more centralized, it always, it's never fail. They're the ones who have the prisons, they're the ones who have the guns, and eventually it just becomes to mass suppression of the people. And, Barack Obama came into the office. He got elected because people were so fed up with George W. Bush, who went in there claiming that he was a conservative and he was everything but. And Barack Obama came in and said, I'm different. This is hope and change. We're going to have change. We're not going to be George Bush. I, being correct about 99.9% of the time, said that if you like George Bush, you will love Barack Obama because he will be Bush on steroids. And that, what did he do? He just took whatever program, spendings, and all that stuff that George W. Bush started, and he just went out there and he injected them with whatever it was, some kind of uppers or whatever, and just immensely got more and more and more. And so my point is that, no, you don't understand, Mr. President, but what the people did is they repudiated big government control, and the control of the media. Or as I think Newt Gingrich says, he's going to start calling it now the mainstream propaganda machine, because they're no longer news media. They are not. They're propaganda for that group of elitists who think that it's their job to run the world. And, that Van Jones want to call it a white lash. Well, to a certain point it was. The reason it was is because it was a backlash of the working people in this country. Those people who get up and go to work every morning, there are more whites than there are anybody else, so you can call it a white lash if you want to. But it was a white lash, backlash, black lash, Latino lash, Jewish. It was every one of those people who pay the bills, who make this country work. It was them who rose up and said enough is enough.
And you always think it's interesting, the Newt Gingrich thing. Newt Gingrich always criticizes the media, but that's who's paid him ever since he was not really a player in politics as far as elected office goes, because he's been a commentator, he's been a show host and everything else, and kind of continues to be, so it's interesting. Carol, your thoughts?
Well, I would no way equate Barack Obama with George Bush. I think George Bush did lose his way, but there were substantial differences between the two. But about that Obama comment that he could have beaten Donald Trump, that if he had run, well, he did run. He did run. If you saw any of the video of him campaigning for Hillary in a lot of swing states that went the exact opposite direction from when they, from before, from voting Democrat, that blue wall across the north. I mean, he campaigned in those states, and they said, we're tired of you, buddy. We've had enough of you, and we're not going to continue your legacy. If you remember those screaming tyrants, I mean, he was almost apoplectic. He was almost panicked. If you don't vote for Hillary, you're going to reject my legacy. Well, guess what? That's exactly what happened. He almost invited the rejection by saying those very same things, by equating Hillary with himself. That was just another nail in the coffin of the most unlikable, unapproachable, nastiest candidate maybe in the history of this country, and Hillary Clinton. But the fact that he was draping himself around her neck and saying that, it was his legacy, and if they didn't vote for her, and then to add insult to injury, blaming the white working class, especially Southerners, who didn't vote for Hillary. Well, how illogical is that? Twice this country voted for him, a black man. Once they voted against the white woman. Where's the racism there? Voted for a black twice and voted against her. Let's look at the candidates. They had just had enough. 8 years of Barack Obama was about all they could stomach. And the fact that Hillary would mostly continue his policies was more than the electorate could bear. And he got more Hispanics and more blacks than anyone thought he would.
I think that, looking back, history, I hope, doesn't forget about Bernie Sanders, because that young, energetic Democratic vote is what got him elected.
And they abandoned
They
the
never
party.
went for Hillary.
No.
As soon as he was out, I think a lot didn't turn out. They surely didn't vote for him. They might have gone to Jill Stein or somebody.
The one characteristic that millennials and young people value above all else is authenticity. She was the most inauthentic candidate ever, and Bernie was he stayed true to himself. I mean, he's a loon in my opinion, but
right.
I mean, he's but he stayed true to himself, and he put out all those things, and he promised them everything. He was like Uncle Santa Claus there.
Warren, wrap this one up for us.
We're talking about those young black Democrats. There was a whole lot of those young white Republicans who voted for Barack Obama too, because they bought it on the hope and change deal.
Sure.
Very interesting stuff. All right, the no vote in the UN hearing over Israeli settlements in the West Bank has just kind of led to this snowball. Now the latest thing that we heard, Benjamin Netanyahu actually on the phone with the Prime Minister of New Zealand, who is also a pretty big player in how things go. On his thoughts about it in that country's is, we're going to talk about the no vote. Should a no vote even be acceptable for big votes in the UN? 7:26, we continue with Wingin It Wednesday after this. 7:29, it's Wingin It Wednesday, brought to you by our friends over at Service Cadillac. Hey, you still looking for that deal? What about $12,000 off the 2016 XTS? And the one I got, $10,000 off a 2016 CTS. You got to go see it. Obviously, all these prices plus tax tag and license. In-stock units only as well. That deal is good through New Year's Eve. Let's move on to the UN resolution, especially the one affecting Israel and Israeli settlements. Gosh, I can't get it out. I can't eat Oreos this early in the morning. Israeli settlements in the West Bank. I'm admitting a lot today because it's the last Wingin' It Wednesday of the year. The no vote, the U.S. no vote, is really kind of what propelled this thing. And it kind of led us to ask, Bernie and I were talking about this kind of when we saw it kind of coming down the pipeline. A no vote is a really big deal. Should you be allowed to no vote, especially when you are such a power like the United States? Carol, you can kick this one off.
Are you serious?
Yeah, go.
Of course, there should be a no vote. We happen to be one of the few rational voices in the UN. It's run now by a series of third world thugs. And, but you got to they got a sense of humor. When you can put Sudan in charge of the Human Rights Commission, the UN has a real sense of humor, sick as it may be. Is there a future with Israel, was the question? Our future with Israel is great. There's no question in my mind. We have an exceptional future with Israel after the way Netanyahu has been treated by this president, which of course plays into the meme that that he's very sympathetic to Muslims, and that's what people believe because of his behavior. I mean, nobody's imagining the things that he's done, calling acts of terrorism, Islamic terrorism, workplace violence. The man has lived in a bubble for the last 8 years. He rules. He governs. No, he rules. He rules by ideology instead of reality. And this Israel situation is such a perfect example of that. The word was widely reported that Trump had called the Egyptian president Sassi, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, the general, and asked him to please withdraw the resolution. Apparently, the general did agree, the Egyptian president did agree to withdraw the resolution. What happened? The Obama administration, deciding that they wanted one last slap at Bibi Netanyahu, goes behind the Egyptian president and talks the Security Council into passing the resolution against Israel. Does anybody realize the long-term ramifications of this? This throws Israel into the World Court. The World Court is dominated by more third world thugs who are only itching to get their hands on Benjamin Netanyahu. Don't they have an arrest warrant out for George Bush? Something like that. I mean, it's just crazy making stuff. So we should have a no vote, and as a matter of fact, I think the whole country should say no to the UN, get it out of here, and use that real estate, put Trump name on it, and call it another Trump Tower, and get the UN out of the U.S. I used to think Jesse Helms. I'm dating myself now. I know Warren remembers Jesse Helms. I used to think he was an old crackpot with bad teeth, but the guy was right, and he was just way ahead of his time about the UN.
All right, Warren. Crackpot with bad teeth, eh?
Carol, were you a member of the John Birch Society?
No, I was not. And I have no truck with those people. I'm talking about reality here. The UN has degenerated into a Tower of Babel that gets absolutely nothing done. They send peacekeepers in. What do? They rape women in the Congo.
Okay. Hold on. I just asked one question.
Don't get me started on the UN.
The reason I asked that one question is because I remember when I was in high school, and the big deal was that John Birch Society was running really, really strong, battling the international communist conspiracy. And the big deal was that the United Nations was the main player in that communist conspiracy. And so you had billboards springing up all around the country, get us out of the UN. And there was a veterinarian in town where I lived and an attorney that both were really learned people and a medical doctor, and they were members of that group. And so they were circulating petitions to get us out of the UN. And so I went around with those petitions, getting people to sign them. So Carol,
Well, I'm a slow learner, okay?
slow learner,
I went to USL, University of Slow Learners.
But over the years, I do think that there is a need for some kind of an international body where we can come together and talk and discuss ideas and all that. But the UN has never, ever served the purpose that it was. Well, I don't really know what its purpose was set up for. If it was supposed to be a peacekeeping purpose, they haven't kept the peace. And, as far as can we cast a vote, the way the rules were set up with the Security Council, which I think there are 5 members, each of them has a veto vote. And whatever comes up, and if it comes to the Security Council, any one of those 5 can veto it, period, cut and dried, no questions asked. All you have to do is just say no. And whenever we decided to get involved in the war in Korea, and it came before the UN. We did not go to Korea to battle. We went there under the United Nations flag. It was the UN that sent the troops in. Of course, we had probably, 90% of the troops there. But when that vote came up for the Security Council vote, there was one group there that did not show up to vote. And who was that?
Who was it?
The Union of the Soviet Socialist Republics, the main communist in the world. And the John Bircher said that is because they wanted the UN to go in there into Korea and get mired down and get involved in that, because that way everything that happened over there in the war was handled by the UN, and the communists who controlled the UN would get all of the information, have all the battle plans, have everything that we were doing. And so, and that they were judged as crackpot conspirators and such stuff, which many of them were. But on the other hand, that the UN really, when you look at what they have done around the world, they've done nothing. When I was in Cyprus, they had UN peacekeeping troops there. We, at the time, the United States, 75% of the UN budget was paid for by the United States of America. The Embassy Marines in Cyprus, of which there was about 12, I've forgotten now, out of that 12, I think 10 of us had been to Vietnam. And that at that time, and I'm really dating myself, but the average pay for us as corporals and sergeants was about $350 a month or something. The UN was paying these all these Danish and Swedes and whatever the peacekeeping forces. The United Nations was paying them like $450 a piece a month.
From our tax dollars, mostly.
From our tax dollars,
yes.
Meant we were paying those guys more than our government was paying us.
Wow.
And that.
So it doesn't really have a place in modern.
Well, if you look at there was the League of Nations, right? That didn't work very well. And then we had World War II. So now we have the United Nations. Well, in the beginning, the United Nations was made up of mostly Western democracies, or democracies at best. Now you've had the breakup of all these countries into ethnic enclaves, and you have these third world countries, and the majority of the countries who are members of the UN are not democracies. And so you've got these third world thugs setting agendas for the whole world and not being very good at it, thank goodness, because their agenda is terrible in most cases. And so it's degenerated. Charles Kratheimer has a good point. He said we should dissolve the UN and just make, move it to Zimbabwe. He said, do you think they would get that much attention paid to them if they were in Zimbabwe somewhere? None of the reporters, none of the diplomats would want to go to Zimbabwe, but New York City they get free parking. How many unpaid parking tickets are there in Manhattan? They live a wonderful life in Manhattan. They never want to solve any problems because then they'd have to go away. No, it's just become another corrupt institution that needs to be done away with because billions of our dollars are going to underwrite this piece of dreck.
All right, we move on to North Korea and the possibility that they could have a nuclear weapon that would reach the West Coast. I'll believe it when I'll see it, but we'll get the panelists' opinion on it next at 7:38. 7:44 at KPEL. As we start to make plans for 2016, I believe there's a roast in the future. We'll see.
Beef or pork?
I like a steamship round. Anyway, as we move on, we're going to talk about North Korea. These so-called, I love experts because there could be an expert on anything. This expert says that North Korea will have a nuclear weapon that can reach the West Coast within 4 years. But they haven't had one that made it 4 lengths of a football field off the coast yet. So that's a lot of work to be done in only 4 years. The question is, do we really even take this seriously? Because a lot of what he's about and that whole regime has been about is convincing their own people how powerful they are. You know, they had launched the new airliner, but what does the promotional video have? Kim Jong-un flying it. Does anyone really believe he can fly a commercial airliner? Warren, let's start with this with you. Are you shaking in your boots over there?
Not quite. I don't even know who put this stuff out. I mean, of the different countries that have nuclear weapons, I mean, to get them from one place to another, that doesn't necessarily take a rocket. You can do it by ship. You can do it by truck if you're on land, whatever. Anyway, whatever North Korea is going to do, the biggest threat to them right now is their nuclear weapon hitting Japan, hitting South Korea, hitting mainland China, or whatever, before we got to worry about it. And besides that, if they do, can we shoot it down? I would think we probably can. And, North Korea, one of these days, is just totally going to evaporate under its own. And that if they ever open that border, North Korea will cease to exist as a lunatic nation. Because as soon as the people see that what's on the other side, they will go back and just absolutely clean house up there. And it's going to be kind of like it is in Cuba. Once we open trade and open relations with Cuba, what do you think is going to happen? It's going to totally transform everything down there from the way it is now to what it could be. And I was in Puerto Rico back probably 15 years or so ago, and they had a vote on whether or not they wanted to become statehood, whether they wanted to become a state, and they voted it down, which they used to. They all wanted it. And then they said, no, we don't want that, because if we do, we'll be just like Hawaii. Then we got to pay all those taxes, because Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens, but they don't have to pay federal income tax. And I said something about, well, one of these days we need to open up Cuba. No, never want that. No. I said, why not? I said, you open Cuba, Puerto Rico will cease to exist. Because that everybody will be trading there, people will be going there, and on and on and on. And, that anytime you got a little old country where you got a lunatic in charge of it, mm-hmm. and they're sitting there and basically they control everything that anybody sees or hears, this country has gotten close to that with our mainstream media of trying to brainwash everybody and make us believe what they want us to believe, what they're telling us, this is the truth, you have to believe it, But anytime you got that one of those little old countries, they're dangerous. They're only dangerous up to a point. And, as big and as powerful as we are, they're no threat to us, and I don't think they will be within 40 years, let alone 4.
Well, we've seen in the last 8 years, we're the threat to us. We are the threat to us. We'll implode. I mean, Khrushchev had it right when he pounded on the UN back in the 60s. He pounded on the podium, and you'll destroy yourselves from within. Took a little longer than he thought it would. He didn't live to see it, but unfortunately, it's been happening. So I don't take anything for granted with North Korea, with Cuba, with any of these dictatorships. You have no idea. And besides that, China, they are a client state of China. If they had not been propped up by China all these years, they would not even exist. They would not have anything. The people would be in even worse shape than they are now. And China has to decide, and nobody has put any pressure on China to actually be a full functioning member of the world community. China's had it both ways for far too long. And if China had a little pressure put on them, perhaps they might start listening. I mean, they did under Deng Xiaoping. I mean, they opened up a little bit more, of course, than they did with Mao. Mao was a total nationalist. But, I mean, they could stop this. But the other thing is, now that we have the Iran deal, Iran and North Korea have been communicating very, very frequently, have been trading technology, nuclear technology. And now that Iran's is on steroids, thanks to this stupid deal that I hope Trump does decimate the whole deal. But I mean, there's no telling what will go back and forth between these two. I don't put anything past any of these people. They will starve their people to accrue power to themselves. They have no soul, absolutely no soul at all, no empathy. They'll kill their people for no reason at all. So as long as China props up North Korea, they're a threat to anybody. I mean, China is protecting them. China is propping them up. China is propping up their economy as much as it is. And I understand that they have been trading nuclear technology up to this point with Iran. So we'll see what happens after the quote-unquote deal.
All right, it is the final Wingin' It Wednesday episode before the end of 2016. What are we taking forward to 2017? What have we learned? And what are we just leaving behind? We wrap up with Warren, Caudle, and Carol Russ next on KPEL. 7:54 at KPEL as we start to wrap up with Wingin' It Wednesday. This Sunday, the start of 2017. Carol, what are you taking ahead in 2017? What are you leaving behind in 2016?
Well, I just like a continuation of everything good and a cessation of everything bad. But if I were to look, you said what lessons should we take forward to 2017 on the federal level? I'd like to see Congress use the Congressional Review Act and the 51 vote majority and get some of this stuff wiped out. On the state level, I'd finally like to see a real reform of this state's crazy, inefficient, stupid budget process. I'd like to see that. Mm-hmm. And on the local level, I'd like to see somebody fix some roads, with that $600 million budget that we have. Can we find like $20 million in there for some roads? Every road in Lafayette is crumbling.
But I hope you should know that
crumbling.
Every other section of Camellia, it goes bad every 2 years. So then
and how many times have we had to pay for that? And where's the ombudsman for the taxpayer looking at all those contractors and saying, you better put down a good substrate, you better put down a good road, because we don't want to have to repair this thing every 10 years because you did a bad job.
Warren, what are you taking? What are you leaving behind?
What I'm leaving behind, I think, is a watershed, wonderful year in humanity.
Trump got elected. Warren is happy. Nothing can make him unhappy.
Yeah, and it's really and truly the reason why he got elected. I think that common sense is starting to come back into the political process, and I think that into the society as a whole is that, people are getting ready, or people have spoken and have said, enough is enough. We got to get back to doing what we do best. And the United States needs to get back to doing what it does best, and that is being that great beacon of freedom and of hope, of prosperity for people, where you're free to become the best that you can be and to pursue your aspirations instead of being this little nation of wimpy whiners and everybody is a victim. And
everybody gets a trophy.
And everybody gets a trophy.
The participation bowl. Isn't that what that guy called in the other day?
And we have got these idiotic institutions around here that we call institutions of higher learning, colleges, universities, or whatever. Now we've got them where they're state, private, local, subsidized government, foreign-owned, or whatever, who are coming in here and are doing nothing but draining money out of us and trying to brainwash people. And I just think that I would really like to see the budgeting process of Louisiana get totally revamped. And I would like to see some sanity come to this stuff about how we do budgeting, how we collect tax money, who collects it, where does it go, how many hands does it have to pass through. I would like to see some accountability, talking about the roads deal. Now, there are some people who would say that basically that is part of the conspiracy process, is that your buddies get the contracts, they go out there, they do a shoddy job, then they get called back to redo it, and they get the charge for that. Everything is on time and material. Whether that's true or not, I don't really know. But I know when you look back through Louisiana history, you have had these deals where that there were certain engineering firms out here who got paid to just sign off on every bridge project and every widening of the road and all this, that, and other. That, where the state has people who can do all of that. Well, yeah, but, it's easy for us to pay them. You got certain law firms out here who get paid to make settlements on lawsuits that people bring against the state. Why don't the state lawyers do? Well, it's better we give them the work to these other people.
Well,
a lot
I think
of those
all
things
those,
I would like to see reformed.
All right, well, I think all those things are going to be better in 2017 as we close the book on 2016. Thanks, guys.
Thank
we appreciate you coming
Happy
in
New
each
Year,
and every week.
everybody.
It is 7:58. Coming up after the top of the hour, we'll talk to Justin Santani from Lafayette Parish Schools. Some area schools will have different principals and assistant principals after the first of the year. We'll catch you up on why those decisions were made and what those decisions will be. Also, your topic train coming up right here on KPEL. This is Acadiana's Morning News.